Well, hello everybody. We're back again. Welcome.
Hey everyone.
I'll let Sam introduce since this is
Welcome
his show.
to this week's In Top Form. Dave and Alex are off again, so Pat and I are doing our second installment of the Fitness Minimalism Takeover. So Dave and Alex are going to be back with us next week, and they are going to share some of their exploits and world travels. So they have been in Southeast Asia. They're back, but they're taking the day off. And next week's episode, we're going to talk about some of their travel experiences, takeaways, and some travel tips for you all. But this week, we are back with fitness minimalism expert Pat Flynn and my good friend. And in case you missed last week's episode, I will let him introduce himself a little bit.
Just checking to see if we're live first, because we always have some issues with Facebook Live. It seems, are we? I think we are.
Check the feed.
Let's see. Just want to make sure that we're not going to go for an hour and a half. We've done that before.
Yeah.
We'll go for an hour and then look back in and there we go. Is that us?
That is us.
All right, cool.
Okay.
All right, so a little bit about me. Sam and I have been friends for years. I've been in the fitness space for a number of years now. For a long time, I kind of was introduced to fitness through martial arts. Sam was actually my Taekwondo coach in college. He's the guy that originally got me started swinging kettlebells. And the rest was kind of history from there. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with physical culture. Growing up as a very sort of out of shape, undisciplined kid, so finding martial arts and finding fitness really helped me to find myself disciplined. And from there, I was able to take what I was really passionate about and turn it into a business. Sam and I have, done many ventures together. My primary business right now is chroniclesofstrength.com. The whole theme, as Sam hinted, is fitness minimalism, helping people to be as effective and efficient as they can with their workouts, with their nutrition. That's sort of my dogma. And within that, all kinds of cool different tools that I like to explore, everything from intermittent fasting to kettlebells and right on down the line. I'm the author of a few books, mostly for dummies titles. Yeah, I've been in the fitness space for a long time now. Excited to be on here and share whatever tips I can.
Awesome. So last week we talked about some of our fitness strategies from a higher level, both on nutrition and exercise. And we came up with this pyramid of exercise. So I don't know if you would call it a priority pyramid.
Yeah.
So let's review that before we get into some more specific, tricks and tips and hacks and things like that.
It's a good name for it, actually, because we were drawing the pyramid. I think I have the blog post up, and we'll post it in the show notes so everyone can read the blog post and see. So here it is, right?
Yeah.
We couldn't figure out what the hell to call this pyramid. So
Right.
I like the idea of priority pyramid, because the idea is whatever's on the bottom, you want to do the most of. Whatever's at the top, that's still important, but you don't. That's the dessert of exercise, right? You don't want to do it. You don't want to make that the staple of every meal. So, brief summary, because we can link back to the other video if you really want to kind of dive into it. But the idea is, if you want to be very generally fit, strong, lean, athletic, most people can really work from the same type of framework. You can be flexible with a lot of the specifics and details, and whether you're doing this exercise or that exercise. But having a general framework to work from is really going to help clear away a lot of the confusion, and it's going to help you find success a lot quicker. So the framework that I really like for people, we can call it the priority pyramid, is at the bottom we have some type of low-level, steady-state cardio activity, like brisk walking. And that you want to do pretty much every day as much as possible. Brisk walking is, referred to it as a force multiplier. When you combine it with the other activities in this pyramid, it's a matter of 1 + 1 = 3 rather than 1 + 1 = 2. But aside from that, even by itself, brisk walking, I believe, is one of the most effective forms of exercise that almost nobody does, right? Because they feel like, if I'm walking, I might as well run or do something else. But that's not true. Walking is one of the best things you can do to burn body fat. Really improves your mood. It's low stress, so it actually promotes recovery. You can do a ton of it without, really hitting a point of diminished returns very early on. It's something you can do socially with a friend very easily. because you can, unlike if you're just like running on a treadmill, you can't really maintain a conversation. So there's so many reasons to increase your walking. So, the minimum we say is about 20 minutes every day, but this is kind of the exception where we would say more is actually more and not be such strict minimalists about it. Then above that, in the sort of next tier of the pyramid, we have strength training. So heavy resistance training. Most people are going to benefit somewhere around like 2 to 4 days a week of this. We could, just call it 3 days a week and leave it at that. And this is, focusing on full body, fundamental human movements that work multiple muscle groups and joints at the same time. So doing the big exercises, squats, deadlifts, pressing, pull-ups, things of that nature, and really working against a large amount of resistance. Something that's going to really challenge you for probably around 5 reps or fewer. And again, like, we can get flexible into specifics. We just want to lay the general framework. And then at the top of the pyramid, the dessert section is like the really high intensity exercise, what we call metabolic conditioning. So this would be things like circuit training, CrossFit types of exercise, kettlebell complexes, sprints. Great exercise, really great for burning calories and burning fat, but also very stressful, very demanding. And part of the structure of this pyramid is to help you get the best combination of exercise, right? So we don't need to do a ton of metabolic conditioning to see really positive effects from it, either for weight loss or improved aerobic or anaerobic performance. So we usually recommend around twice a week for that is a good starting point, and anywhere between 20, like around 15 to 20 minutes. So I guess that's a review. Did I leave anything out?
No, I don't think so. And let's take this pyramid and use it as an example from very recent history. So you guys may not know that Pat actually just earned his first degree black belt yesterday.
Kamsahamnida.
And we used a little different strategy to get you ready than the typical student might.
Yeah.
Right? And that strategy is in large part based on this pyramid. And the pyramid is the idea of having a very broad and strong generalist foundation first. Mm-hmm. And then in a relatively short period of time, we can add the specialization.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we're also big fans of Parkinson's law.
As we've been reminded.
And there's this other idea, though, that procrastination is a bad thing. So, can you hold two conflicting thoughts? And we know procrastination is a bad thing, but we also know that Parkinson's law is true.
Yes.
Okay? So, talk about some of the things that we did to get you ready for this black belt test.
So, it was like in fitness, it was a huge focus on the fundamentals. And one of the best tips that Sam gave me, one of the best pieces of advice was just, hey, 10 kicks a day. It don't even have to be perfect kicks, right? Because, perfection is sometimes the enemy of progress, right? But let's just get in the habit of doing 10 kicks a day. And this was really effective for me because I'm doing a lot of different things. So testing for black belt was like another big thing to add in. So we had to kind of approach it in a way that was going to be practical, that would actually be able to relearn a lot of the material, and in a lot of cases learn a bunch of new material, since the curriculum here is certainly very different than what I did at my old school. So coming up with a framework like 10 kicks a day was great because, that's something I could fit in 5 to 10 minutes right before and right after my workout.
Right.
So I could just have this frequency of practice, which was for kicking and martial arts, for any skill really, frequency is really important. So what I found, my background is music too, so for playing the guitar, I know for me, like, I'm going to get much better results as a guitar player from the skill if I practice for 15 minutes a day than if I just did like 1 2-hour session once a week.
Right.
And I found, like, it seems like this is very true for martial arts too. Like, much better results. My kicks became much crisper. I developed the skill a lot quicker, even though I wasn't practicing for as long of a duration, but more frequently. So even just like 5, 10, 15 minutes of practice, but doing it every single day was huge for me. And like it made sense, but like I can be smart sometimes, but I can be dumb a lot of other times. So like I know this is true because as a musician, this is how I've really improved my guitar skills in spite of everything else. But it was just cool and interesting to hear Sam like give me the same approach and see it work for martial arts too.
And I think it can work for your fitness in general, and this is what we're talking about here, right? There's a low barrier to this, and that's why it works so well.
Yeah.
There's a low barrier for effort, and there's a low barrier for time. So it's pretty easy to commit to walking 20 minutes a day, 5 to 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Just like it was easy for you to commit to doing 10 kicks, per leg, but 10 kicks a day every day.
Yeah.
Right? You can squeeze it in your kitchen or do it right before or right after your workout. So when it comes to your fitness in general, set yourself up for success. Don't create these high thresholds like, oh, I got to do this high intensity workout 3 days a week and it's an hour long and I got to drive to the gym and do all this. You just got to walk for 20 minutes a day.
This is actually a great example of something I think we might have even talked about last time, of the idea of like goal setting. So right, setting one big goal that really excites you. So for me that was like getting black belt.
Right.
But then breaking it down and making sure you have, micro goals or smaller goals that you can easily check off, so that way you get that feeling of confidence and success early on to build the momentum to carry through. So like, yeah, black belt was a huge goal, but like I was able to check off I did my 10 kicks today.
Right.
And that made me feel good. I'm like, yes, like I'm able to get those early wins out of the gate, and that really, helped build my confidence to really push through and learn, because it was a lot of stuff to learn. But it was because Sam helped make it practical and chunk it down for me that I didn't feel overwhelmed. So same thing with fitness. Like even 20 minutes of walking can sound like a lot, but then we can say you don't have to do it all at once, right? Exercise has a very cumulative effect. So, maybe like don't focus on 20 minutes, but maybe just a certain number of steps a day, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000, right? So like same thing, like I didn't have to do, and rarely did I do all my 10 kicks at once. Sometimes if I was at the gym, I would, but a lot of times it would just be like, I'm in the kitchen and I'm going to do 5 side kicks here, 5 side kicks there,
right,
a few roundhouses, and then just making sure at the end of the day that I had met my quota.
So there's a couple things here, right? And you touched on it, the idea of overwhelmed. So like I get overwhelmed when it comes, like you've seen my office, right? It's
like my attic.
It's cluttered, right? So I get overwhelmed with that idea, like, oh wow, I got to clean my office or I got to clean my desk. But if you just I got to clean this pile, this pile, this pile, and you don't look at the whole big picture, is just section by section, and then you can kind of get through it. And exercise and your fitness and tackling your nutrition habits, that all works the same way. But here's the rub, right? The things that are easy to do are also easy not to do.
Yes.
Right? So it's very easy to walk 20 minutes a day. It's very easy to throw 10 kicks a day once you know how to do it.
Yes.
But it's also easy not to do that. And, there's no like immediate dire consequence of not doing it.
Exactly.
Right? So that's...
Aside from public humiliation.
Well...
I had a black belt test.
But it's not immediate.
This is true.
It's not immediate, right? So like... that, a year from now or whatever, that you have to test for your black belt. But for most people, they're just generally, losing those couple extra pounds. They don't have to necessarily parade themselves in front of over 200 people.
This is true, yeah.
Right? So what I'm getting at is, you have this big goal that's important to you. It's purposeful for, your why of doing it. It's like, well, you want to or you need to lose this weight, but why do you need to do that? So that has to be purpose driven, but not focusing on the outcome of what you're doing, is focusing on the process, and if not falling in love with the process, at least committing to the process, and then the commitment to the process itself is the goal.
Yeah.
Not the outcome.
So a few things there is like I absolutely fell in love with my martial arts practice all over again. So like I'm super just excited about the process itself. But the other thing, like, how can we actually like skin in the game is really what I'm trying to say. Is like I actually had skin in the game for the goal because we did set a pressing deadline. So like we can talk about how that plays into Parkinson's law. But at the same time, like I knew if I didn't start doing my 10 kicks a day, I was going to get out in front of 200, 250 people and look like an ignorant ass. And like so I had my neck on the line. And like I think that really helps when it comes to goal setting, is to set some kind of stakes, right? And like whether it's carrot or stick, probably even like a mixture of both is the way to do it. But yeah, because like if I knew I had like a year, right, it would have been very easy for me to just put off, I don't need to do my 10 kicks today, I have a year. Right? But we had some very pressing deadlines and some skin in the game. Like I wasn't backing out of it, like I was fully committed, so no matter what, I was going to be on that floor doing my black belt tests. So if I didn't start doing my 10 kicks a day, public humiliation it's a good motivator.
Right.
It is.
But maybe we don't have to go so far as public humiliation.
Mm-hmm.
But
don't throw it out.
Don't throw it away.
It could
don't
be
throw
very
it.
useful.
It can be an extremely powerful tool. But how about the idea of just public accountability?
Yeah.
So what are some ways that we do that, or that you do that with your clients?
Yeah, so like I use for my clients Facebook groups a lot, and they're really useful where people can go in and they can just be very vocal about what their goals are, and even we can call them accountability buddies,
right?
Something like that, like where you find somebody else. And it's better if you really do find somebody like through a Facebook group who you're not like best friends with. Like me and Sam are really good friends, so obviously like we could let each other slide or this or that.
Right.
So you're more likely to actually uphold your end of the deal if it's somebody that you don't have that intimate of a relationship with. So there's a few ways. One, just publicly posting about something like that is a certain degree of putting skin in the game. Like saying, hey guys, I want everyone to know that my goal for the next month is to do this. The reason I'm posting is because, one, this is important to me, and two, I want some public accountability, so you can expect at the end of the month that I'm going to give you a progress report. And just being willing, and like, yeah, that's sometimes a little bit scary, but that's the point, is being willing to take that step, whether it's just on your Facebook page or in a Facebook group, is investing in yourself and putting skin in the game. And is it foolproof? No, but it's at least greatly going to increase your chances that you will follow through by putting yourself in that public arena.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is, yeah, like connecting and having an accountability buddy
some comments
where you can hold each other to certain measures of progress. Like, hey, every week. So in fitness, one thing that I do with people is when I match them up is like they have to keep training logs for each other. So every week they have to swap training logs or food logs or whatever. And this is a really effective measure because you're a lot more likely to do it when somebody else is depending on you. Right, so it's easy like to skip out on it if you know that you don't have to give your log to somebody. So this is where having an accountability buddy or a coach, and we can talk about why logging is important. It really is, and that's a probably worth discussing. But having a coach or somebody that at the end of every week, right? Every Friday, I have to get them my progress report or my training log. This is again one of those little things that will greatly increase your chances of success.
So, we just did a really, I think, crucial, tip, force multiplier for your, health, fitness, weight loss. That idea of making a public announcement of accountability so that you stick with the process of your goal. So, Pat and I are here taking over the show this week, and we're talking about some fitness minimalism tips, tricks, hacks to multiply your efforts in getting in shape and losing weight. And then next week, Dave and Alex are going to be back, and we're going to be talking more about travel and some cool foods that they have and some other things that they have brought back for us from their exploits in Southeast Asia.
Foods we're probably about to tell you not to eat.
Yeah. Well, some of us are more adventurous with the foods than others. So on the idea of food, one thing that you and I are both big fans of is this thing called fasting or intermittent fasting. So one thing that I'm doing right now, and it just works well with my schedule, and that's the other thing, whether it's exercise or diet, you want to create a system that is going to work and it's going to be easy to stick with, right? So for me, right now, it makes sense for me to do my fasting 2 days a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, I typically work out earlier in the day and I run a lunchtime class instead of an evening class. So I can fast through most of the morning, work out, teach, which is also a bit of working out. Then I'll typically, get a shake in, maybe not, have a meeting or two, and then eat a meal around like 3 o'clock. Mm-hmm. Then go back to work if that's what you want to call what we do. And then I'll typically, scare quotes around work. Then typically train again Tuesday and Thursday night, and then have a whole meal. Yeah. So my calorie deficit days are actually heavier training days on the cardiovascular end. Yeah. And then my strength training days are Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah.
So what do you think? And, give us some insight on why this can work well.
Yeah, so I think maybe back up and talk about like why people might want to fast to begin with.
Sure.
Who are
Yeah,
new
maybe
to the
jumped
idea.
ahead a little bit.
So, fasting is a tool that really, the reason it's such a useful tool is it helps you to achieve a calorie deficit. And, we talked about on the last episode of how any diet can really work so long as it follows a few basic principles, right? So this is why you can find examples of people who've had success following wildly different diets, right? Some people follow low-carb diets, other people are vegetarian, some people follow paleo or Mediterranean, and you can find people who've had success with all of these. But fundamentally, any successful diet tends to follow like two principles. One is it achieves, if you're looking for weight loss, some type of caloric deficit, either long-term or in a cyclical nature. And number two, it tends to focus on foods that are relatively unprocessed and close to nature. And of course, one sort of feeds the other there. The more foods you eat that are very nutritionally dense and lower calories, like that's going to help principle number one, obviously. That's why you don't find too many people who are, having a ton of fitness and weight loss success on the standard American diet, but you can find some. Right,
Sure.
Because it hits principle number one. Like somebody in kind of my space right now is making that argument, like, hey, I can actually lose weight eating Big Macs. I just have to not eat too many Big Macs.
Right.
And that's true. It's just like that's going to be highly unpractical and unreasonable for people because like who just eats like one Big Mac and like usually like if I start eating crappy and other people and you start eating a lot of carbs and sugar, you tend to crave those things more.
Right.
And they're very easy to overconsume, right? It's a lot easier to overconsume a bag of potato chips than it is a bowl of broccoli,
Right.
for example, right? So it's not to say you can't lose weight and still have potato chips. You can. It's just it makes it a lot more difficult. So fasting is a really powerful tool because it can help you mimic the benefits of a long-term reduced calorie diet, which, there's not many things that we're certain about scientifically when it comes to fitness and health, but that's one thing we are pretty much certain about, that if you want to improve your chances of living longer and being healthier, a reduced calorie diet will do that, right? The problem is that that's very hard to do, right? It's hard to just maintain a long-term low-calorie diet. Fasting, however, helps to mimic those effects by doing it in sort of a cyclical or rotational way. So fasting really can help burn body fat, it can help balance certain hormones, it can help improve biomarkers across the board. It's really a powerful tool for helping people who might be like hypoglycemic or have type 2 diabetes to improve insulin sensitivity. That being said, always work with your doctor on it first because it may worsen some symptoms at first. In the same way, like if you haven't exercised in a long time and you start exercising, like it might not feel all that great.
Yeah.
Because fasting is a stressor, like exercise, but when used in the right amounts and when done the right way, that stress creates a positive adaptation, right? But you can absolutely overdo it or do it the wrong way, so you got to be smart about it. So that's why you might want to start fasting, is because it can really help you to just cut large chunks of calories out of your diet in a way that is far less painful, than trying to follow some type of long-term, very restrictive diet. So it's kind of like a sneaky way to attack nutrition. That said, I will offer the disclaimer that, fasting isn't some miracle cure. You're not going to be able to, out-fast an otherwise terrible diet. So, what we started talking about here, it's very important to have your foundation first. You should, before you even consider fasting, you want to make sure that your diet is relatively healthy to begin with. It would be kind of counterproductive, maybe not completely pointless, but certainly not the best thing in the world if, you're doing a 12-hour fast, 16-hour fast every day, but then just eating ice cream cake for dinner.
Right.
That's going to be, it's not going to be great. Is it better than eating ice cream cake for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Yes, but I'd rather you focus on having a healthier breakfast, lunch, and dinner rather than just skipping breakfast, lunch, and having an unhealthy dinner, if that makes sense, right? So the point I want to make is while fasting is a very powerful tool, it's not something that you should try to use to compensate for an otherwise bad diet. Rather, it's something you should use as a force multiplier in a sense all right, we've got a very healthy framework that we're following, and like we just said, like there's a number of like pretty much any framework can work, whether you want to be vegetarian, paleo, Mediterranean, low carb, whatever, it doesn't matter. But have some kind of framework, and then fasting is a tool that you can use to get even more benefits out of that. And I completely forget what your original question was. Maybe I answered it, maybe I didn't.
Yeah. My question was about a specific protocol, and kind of gave some examples of that.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, one thing I want to throw in, and this is maybe a little bit more qualitative and less scientific, but mentally, it seems like you feel more alert and more productive in a fasted state.
Yes.
Once you're used to it. People, when again, in the beginning, when you're new to fasting, you might have headaches, you feel lightheaded, something like that. But once you kind of get in the groove of doing this intermittent fasting, even if it's not every day of the week, it seems like, again, this is qualitative from my experience and others that we work with, that you're more alert, you're more productive. You have a little more drive to get after it, so to speak, in the mornings and get stuff done in a fasted state.
Well, there is a theory for this, and it's not completely unsubstantiated. And it's the idea that, in a fasted state, you're biologically on the hunt, right? So when we're hungry, it wouldn't make sense that when we are hungry, right? Like thinking back, like in terms of evolution, like before we had all these conveniences that we have today, like where we actually had to hunt and gather for our food, it wouldn't make sense that if we were hungry, we would down-regulate. Right? It would make sense if we were hungry that we would up-regulate, that we would increase our energy, increase our output, increase our mental focus, sense of alertness, etc., because we need to go get food. Right? So like it makes perfect sense, and now they're showing that like this is true scientifically, that fasting actually can increase things like alertness, focus, mental concentration, and pretty much any measure of productivity. Right. Over the long term, once you become more we call it metabolically flexible. Once you're used to working in a fasted state, which a lot of people are not. So if you've never really fasted before, like it's the same thing of like not being exposed to the stress of exercise. Like if you haven't exercised in 30 years and you go and do a workout, even if it's a relatively easy-ish workout, it's gonna be hard, right? It might not feel all that great at first, but once you get very strong and conditioned, it's a totally different story. So you got to approach fasting the same way. As again, it is a stressor, but over time, that the stressor will create some very positive effects for you. But also beyond that is exactly what Sam is saying, is like you can use fasting as a tool for productivity, because once you do become adapted to it, you may very well find that when you're in, and this is true for me also, I do almost all of my work in the morning in a fasted state, that you are more focused, you are more productive, and that does make sense from sort of a biological evolutionary standpoint.
It definitely makes sense, and it's intuitive. It bears out.
Yeah.
I just don't want to say like this is how it works, because we how do you know what you know, and nobody's really taking the time to prove it out.
Yeah.
So
we need big fasting to fund these
that's
studies.
Right. And where's the money in big fasting?
Where's the money in big fasting? We're going to start a lobbying effort. If anyone wants to just drop some donations, we'll get the big fasting.
We're going to start the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
GoFundMe. So a couple specific strategies to start fasting. Right?
Yes.
So what I described is what sometimes people call like a 5-2 strategy. So I'm fasting 2 days a week. To have a pretty low calorie day on those 2 days.
Yeah.
So that's one strategy. It seems to be pretty effective. You can talk about that one more, or maybe some other different strategies for people to get started on this idea of fasting.
No, I think the 5-2. So 5-2 isn't like technically fasting. Like it could be. It depends how you do it.
Right.
But the original idea between the 5-2 diet, which was pretty popular a few years ago, and Wiley actually commissioned me to write the For Dummies book on it, so I know a good deal about it. The summary is that twice a week you just bring calories down, right? So it's called 5-2 because twice a week you have just 2 500-calorie meals, and that's it. And typically you'll do it for lunch and dinner, right? So I say like it's not technically fasting because you're still eating, right? Which, like fasting is kind of like pregnancy. You're either in a fasted state or you're not, right? It's hard to be like halfway fasted. But it's still effective because it again, like, cycles the calories, and over the long term, you're going to be achieving a deficit, which is really what matters. But it does prolong a certain fasting period. Like, if you're not having your first meal until lunch, well, you are fasting. You still are getting the benefits of a strict fast, but then you just have 500 calories at lunch, 500 calories at dinner, and again, those exact calorie calculations are going to vary depending on you and what your daily caloric estimations and needs are. Like, maybe it's only like 300 calorie meals, for example. But again, the idea is twice a week you bring your calories down by eating just two, maybe 300 to 500 calorie meals. And this is a really good way to sort of introduce yourself to fasting, and a lot of people may never even have to go beyond that. It's very practical. Don't feel that you have to do like long. Like, some people do like these like 14-day fasts. Yeah, you could do that, and there's like some people who say that there's some benefits in that. I'll say I've never done a 14-day fast, but really what we do know scientifically is most of the benefits of fasting, really a lot of them occur in the first 12 to 16 hours anyways. So you don't need to do a 2-week fast to reap the benefits of intermittent fasting. Kind of like we were talking about before, like even shorter fasts but less frequent are really beneficial. So I do like the 5-2 approach. I like it a lot. I think it's a very practical way to get started. It's something that people can really stick with long term. So that's often a number of ways that I do get my clients started. So we come up with a healthy framework for people to follow overall, and then twice a week we just kind of take the scythe and slash the calories.
Yeah, and it's very. And I shouldn't say it's easy, but it's a very approachable way to get started with fasting, kind of seeing how this lever can work for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So another, strategy is that idea of, taking a break from eating once a day. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so...
Or once a week, right?
Yeah, just once a week. Like, you just stop eating, right? So once a week, you just, like, one day, you just, like, I'm not going to eat today. And that's great. Like, that works really well for a lot of people. It's a little more difficult. So, like, as far as, like, the intensity spectrum goes, it's obviously harder to not eat for a full 24 hours than it is for 12 hours.
Right.
So just expect that. But again, like, the same type of effect is achieved. Like, if we're just taking 1 day's worth of calories out for the week,
right,
like, your number is going to go down long term. And, like, that's a pretty... And it sounds difficult, but... the way you make it easier is how you time your fast, right? So the best way to do it is, for example, I would eat dinner tonight, and I just wouldn't eat again until dinner the next day.
Right.
So it's not that hard. I maybe wouldn't start a lot of people there. Like, again, like, everyone's, like, I think 5-2 is going to be a little bit more accessible for a number of people. But if you're already following a generally healthy diet, it's not unreasonable to just eat dinner tonight and then just not eat again until dinner the next day. Some people do that pretty often just on accident.
Right. And that's, this is, for lack of a better word, a more advanced approach.
Yeah.
It's not the great word, but it is a little bit, it's going to be a little bit more challenging than the 5-2 approach. Mm-hmm. But you don't have to make it so challenging. Like, so today's Sunday, you might not want to have your meal on Saturday night, then you have to fast all day Sunday, and you're just sitting around the house on the couch like, I want to eat.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But if you have your last meal on a Sunday night and you have a busy day on Monday, by accident, you're probably going to be pretty successful. Yeah. And that's one of the, hacks, if you will, is create a system where it's almost inevitable that you'll be successful.
Yeah,
right?
Don't fast on the Super Bowl.
Don't fast on the day of the Super Bowl. Don't fast on a day that you're going to be pretty idle, or on a day, Super Bowl is an example, that you have a lot of socialization planned.
Yeah.
Right? That makes it tough too. Like, hey, we're going to go to the Buttery. We're going to go out to, grab some drinks or watch the game or something like that. And there's going to be food and drink involved.
Yes.
So why put yourself in a situation where you have to exercise your discipline?
Yeah.
Right?
So for me, when I'm doing longer fasts, which I do fairly regularly, but I'm more of the 5-2 approach type of guy. Mm-hmm. It's just, again, like Sam, like, we kind of have similar schedules with working out and this and that, so that works well for us. But when I do longer fasts, like, I schedule them on my busy days where I know I'm just going to be, I'm, for better or worse, I'm distracted, right? So I'm not really focused on like how hungry I am, right? So like on days that I might have a lot of phone calls or meetings, or I'm like going from place to place, that works really well for me because I know like it's just going to be a lot harder if I'm just at home doing work in my kitchen. Right, to be like really hungry in that environment. So when I'm going to make myself hungry, and it's a good thing to make yourself hungry, right? We want to establish a relationship with hunger that isn't completely compulsive, right? We want to learn to kind of be friends with hunger and realize that like actually hunger is kind of a good sign that your diet's probably working and that you are losing weight, and there's a lot of health benefits to being in a fasted, hungry state. So that's one reason to fast, is just to establish a new relationship with hunger rather than this sort of inordinate fear that people have of hunger. Like, oh God, I'm hungry, I better eat. Right? Yeah. There's no reason that should be, and it's very limiting in terms of freedom goes. Like there's nothing like there's this idea or this myth out there that you need to like eat 6 times a day to rev your metabolism, and talk about something that's completely unfounded. There's nothing to support that at all. So again, I got off track. Forget what I was even talking about. Oh, I remember making it practical. Amazing. Thank God I'm in a fasted state. All the synapses are just firing. So one way to make fasting practical is like do it when you're busy and distracted. The other thing is like let sleep do some of the work for you, right? So that's why dinner to dinner plan works really well, because like a big chunk of that is just going to be, you're going to be sleeping. So you're going to be like, unless you're like you get up and like you go like raid the fridge as a sleepwalker, like you're probably pretty okay. You're probably not eating in your sleep.
Which some people have done.
Yeah, I'm sure we're all guilty of that. Yes, sleepwalking. Oh, that's weird.
But I mean, look, you're not going to get a ribbon, for doing this the hard way.
Yeah.
Right. There's no like bonus calories for effort.
Yeah.
Right. So set yourself up for success. That said, there is, I believe, a good psychological benefit for, like you said, being comfortable with hunger. And the reality is we, as Americans, we won the lottery, so to speak.
Yeah.
We really do live in a society of abundance.
Yes.
Right. And having that time to learn what it's like to be hungry, learn what it's like to be uncomfortable, learn that you can really go farther than you think you can.
Yeah.
And hunger and exercise are 2 good ways to experience that.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, I can't go an hour without eating. These people that they have to constantly be eating. And like you said, there's this strange myth out there that like frequent eating increases your metabolism. It's nonsense.
It adds calories potentially.
Potentially you're just going to be eating more, right? But more on that later. That okay, you can go 3-4 hours without eating. You can go 6 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, maybe even longer than that. That what will you learn about yourself in these 2 avenues, whether it's eating or exercise? We're not necessarily talking about unreasonable exercise, but you can do that extra set, you can do that extra rep, you can do this, this complex that is gonna, it's gonna toast you, and that then can become a metaphor for other areas in your life, right?
Yeah.
Because that discomfort tolerance creeps.
Yeah.
Right? So if I become comfortable with being uncomfortable on the exercise floor or with my diet, you gain a little bit of confidence in the meeting room.
You certainly do.
On, doing live talks. One of the biggest fears that people have is this idea of public speaking, and both of us, I think, are like kind of introverted people actually.
Yeah.
Right? But we put ourselves out there all the time, and I think part of that
to people's great dismay.
Yeah. Sorry. But I think part of that journey for us has been through this idea of fitness and exercise and dieting, is that transformational process of knowing where your limits are, pushing them, and then exceeding them.
Yeah, fitness for me has in every way is what made me somebody who is very unconfident, somebody who has a lot of probably too much confidence at times. But I will also, you made another great point there of pushing that stress threshold. That's tough to say. Stress threshold.
Yeah.
That's tough. I'm not gonna one time. That's it. But the idea is like there's little challenges that you can give yourself, and like one thing that I like to do for myself and my clients is like, can you get hungry and then make a good decision? Right? So like this is really important because a lot of times when people make bad decisions, they just have this habit of like they get hungry, like really hungry, and that's when they make their bad decisions. Right. So we're trying to create a new habit or pattern there of responding rather than reacting to hunger. So like, can you intentionally make yourself really hungry and then have a salad instead of a Snickers bar? Right, and just be very intentional about it, and have the self-awareness and develop the self-awareness to do that, because that is a huge skill, right? Because so many people fall off the nutritional wagon because they don't have the skill of being able to respond to hunger and intentionally make a good decision in a state of stress, because that's what it is. Like you're fasting, you're in a state of stress, making a good decision in a state of stress. So that is one skill that fasting can really help you to build. And this is something you can be very intentional about. And again, like start small, challenge yourself and make yourself successful, and then push the envelope from there. So maybe it's just like, oh, hey, I'm going to skip breakfast today. I'm going to be hungry, but can I make a good decision at lunch? Right? Crap, totally failed. We'll scale it back a little bit. Like, all right, maybe push breakfast off an hour or two. Again, it doesn't matter. Like, it's all relative. But the idea is, like, you're challenging yourself, but, again, making sure you're successful, and then increasing the degree of challenge from there. But that is one hugely important sort of hidden benefit or skill from fasting that I believe. I know we're getting like low battery here, so if we cut off
electromagnetic vortex of Dragon Gym.
Nothing personal, but just that skill of being able to get really hungry and then actually make a good decision. Really powerful, and really like if you develop that, then like you've got a lot of advantages. If you can form a new relationship with hunger, there's no reason that you can't be successful in pretty much any nutritional framework, and fasting can help you do that.
I mean, that's pretty powerful, though. That idea of making better decisions in high stress situations.
Like could apply to so many situations.
So many things. That's not just eating. Let's take a small gap. Let's talk about martial arts and self-defense, right? So many people, you get into these fight or flight, but really it's a fight or flight or freeze. And then you're under stress and you make a wrong decision, right? Maybe you escalate a fight that you shouldn't have. Maybe you back down when you shouldn't have. Maybe you ran. Maybe you froze, right? But we could take that even beyond, fitness and beyond martial arts and beyond eating. Like we run into interpersonal situations all the time. Think about the current political climate, right? It elevates our blood pressure, and we hit send on that comment or email or something, right? Can we make better decisions under stress? I love that. That's awesome.
No, I think it's a hugely important principle. And again, there will be a carryover effect, certainly, but I think it's a skill you definitely have to develop in specific situations as well. But what an important skill. So like the analogy for me is music. Like being able to make good musical improvisational decisions under a state of stress is way, like when people are watching you, is way harder than doing it when you're playing in your attic or your basement. How do you learn to do that? You only learn to do that by exposing yourself to it. You can't learn it in theory. You can't learn it by reading a book. The only way you can learn that is by putting yourself in those stressful situations and having the self-awareness and intention of what your practice is and what those decisions are that you're trying to make. And look, at first, you probably will mess up a number of times, and that's okay. You just make sure you find the appropriate amount of challenge, and you scale from there. So whether it's being good at improvising in high stress situations as a musician, or learning to pick the bowl of broccoli over the Snickers bar after a 12 to 16 hour fast, I think it's a hugely important life skill to be able to respond intelligently and efficiently in high stress situations.
And this is kind of more related to music, but you can't be creative. You can't create or make something new if you're afraid of failure and if you're afraid of being wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the best creativity of anybody, whether it's writers or musicians, interestingly enough, occur in the highest stress situations. And one of the funny theories that I've kind of found to be true, and certainly in my life, is as a person gets more comfortable, their stuff really kind of starts to stink in a lot of ways. Not always, but it's certainly true for a number of people. A good example is Mark Twain, who's somebody I've studied a lot of and admired a lot. Is he produced his best work in times of severe distress. But he was somebody who clearly understood how to handle stress and make very good decisions while under stress. And arguably, from a critical standpoint, he made some of his worst work in times of his life that were very prosperous and comfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can think, like, there's a lot of, like, musicians, too, like Beethoven, for example, same thing. Under times of stress, he arguably did some of his best work. Times of comfort, maybe not some of his greatest work. So, yeah, creativity and stress, I believe, are certainly linked. And again, like, I guess it would make sense, like, in the same fasting theory, right? Like, when you're in a time of stress, like, you should upregulate.
Right. Like,
you should become more creative. Like, it would make sense because you got to figure out how to provide for yourself now from a biological standpoint. Why would you downregulate in a time of stress? Like, some people do just because they're so deconditioned, and those are the people that starve to death and die in the wild.
Well,
right? But let's not let that be us, right? Let's expose ourselves to stress.
Let's adapt to the evolutionary pressure.
Yeah, let's expose ourselves to stress in an intelligent way so that we can learn to make the best decisions, be creative, be competitive in a stressful environment.
So before we run out of time and run out of battery, there's one more kind of fasting protocol that I want to talk about, and that's the idea of like the daily fast. Sometimes people do it with like a 16/8 split. Okay, so what is that, and how can people get started on that?
Yeah, so the easiest way to describe this one is you just don't eat breakfast, usually.
Right.
That's it. Like, you just have, and this is...
You can skip breakfast.
Yeah, there's nothing...
It's like revolutionary.
It is, like, it's crazy. There's actually, like, unless you're asking Kellogg's, there's nothing truly sacred about breakfast.
Right.
Like, of course, the cereal companies are going to tell you it's the most important meal of the day, but there's no, like, inherent significance to breakfast over lunch or dinner or any of that. Like, again, it comes down to those two principles that we talked about at the beginning. Like, if you can just understand and work from that mindset, then you can realize that no meal is sacred, right? You can toss out any meal at any point that you want, and you'll be just fine as long as you adhere to those other principles. So yeah, this is a good way to get started with fasting because, again, it works off of the fast that you probably created while sleeping,
right?
And it just extends that a little bit. So this is really nice way for people to get started because, like, you can be very flexible with it. So, you know, say if you normally eat at like 8 o'clock, well, maybe you just start by pushing your first meal back to 10 o'clock,
right?
Or 11, or noon, or 1. And, like, there's people who come up with all kinds of different ways you can do this. So again, like, we could spend hours talking about all the different protocols. Like, some people will say don't really start eating till like 4, but then, like, you know, have like a 4-hour like eating window, etc.
And 4 hours is pretty tight. You might start with a little bit of a larger window, maybe like 8 hours. So, you know, just a simple way would be skip breakfast, have lunch around 12:30.
Yep.
And then make sure you're finished dinner before 8 p.m. It's pretty reasonable.
Easy, practical, reasonable. It's certainly sustainable. And, like, look, you can go and have breakfast still occasionally. Like, it's not like a hard and fast rule. But again, like, what are we achieving? Well, just by cutting breakfast out most days of the week, so long as we're not compensating for that by eating a bunch more at the other meals, which is possible and something you have to be aware of. Like, you can overcompensate later in the day, so you want to make sure you're not doing that. But other things equal, if we just scrap breakfast, you know, even just half the number of days of the week, like, that's probably for most people going to cut a ton of calories out of diet. Yeah, you'll lose weight. You'll be successful.
Frankly, you could do this Monday through Friday.
You could, yeah.
You know, and then Saturday and Sunday, you know, have a nice brunch. Enjoy yourself.
And a mimosa, if you want.
Or a Bloody Mary.
Or a Bloody Mary. Whatever you're into.
You know, do you ever have, what are they called, Bloody Marias?
Mm-mm.
Is,
sounds like it's got a lot of antioxidants.
It's a Bloody Mary with tequila instead of vodka.
So fasting is a force multiplier in the sense that it also tends to increase the effects of alcohol. Yeah, amazing how that works. But
so we've heard.
Again, like, we don't know. Like, this is like not anecdotal. This is completely empirical evidence through what we see through the studies. No personal experience in this at all.
Okay, now probably one of our favorite force multipliers is combining exercise, specifically strength training, and being in a fasted state.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. With what time we have left.
So again, if it shuts off, apologies. iPhones have terrible batteries. I think we need to get like one of those like portable chargers
power
or
packs,
whatever. Yeah. So again, like, fasting is a stress. exercise is a stress, so we can combine those stresses and again like compound the effects, right? But it has to be noted that like when like you take one stress and you add it with another stress, it's going to be extra stressful. Like it's going to be harder. So like don't expect like your fasted workouts at first, at least initially, to be as easy or as strong as your fed workouts, right? But also at the same time, not every workout has to be a fasted workout. So I'll usually do maybe like 1 or 2 fasted workouts a week, and that's plenty for me. But yeah, I mean, there's some very specific benefits of fasted strength training. One very interesting one is like intense exercise in a fasted state tends to increase neurogenesis, or the birth of new brain cells. Is kind of, so like from like just like a neurohack. That's a very interesting observation that has certainly been seen. Clearly, like just like burning more body fat is going to be a benefit of that being in a fasted state, especially if you're following like a lower carb diet like ketosis or something like that. What I have found from being in a fasted state long term is I generally actually do feel a lot more focused and energetic, so long as not all of my workouts are in a fasted state. So again, because like if you're like in a really big deficit long term, like you can expect like you probably aren't going to have the strongest workouts, right? But if you're cyclical about it and working it in a wave, then I feel that that's the best way to go about it. So you can kind of compound all of the good effects of both fasting and exercise by combining them. Intense exercise specifically, not just brisk walking. Like brisk walking and fasting, like that almost should always go together. Like that's really powerful stuff. But intense exercise like strength training, fasting, or even metabolic conditioning and fasting, something I would say worth experimenting or working in, even maybe just once a week.
Yeah, I really like that idea. And it's also, you know, for me, there's a little game I play with myself with the fasting and the working out. So it's like we get very busy working. You know, whether you're writing, answering emails, just whatever it is that you have to be doing. And sometimes our workouts get pushed down on the priority, right? Yeah. And we have this idea like, okay, when I'm done my work, then I'll go work out, right? Well, guess what? There's always, especially for like people like us that are always into new projects and trying something new, there will always be more work to do, right? We don't like clock out at 5 o'clock, right? And I think that's how the world is. Most people don't have that option anymore. Yeah. But we still push it like, okay, when I'm done, then I'm going to go work out. Yeah. And I say, flip that is schedule your work around your workout. Because you're going to get the work done, and Parkinson's law plays in there as well. But then we can also have this little bit of a game where it's like, well, I get to eat after I work out.
Of course, the carrot approach.
Right,
exactly. Yeah. So I really like that, and I completely agree. So what I'll do is, like, again, since we're following this pyramid, and we may only have, like, 2 really intense workouts a week, like, if you're lifting really heavy and doing, like, that's going to be enough. Like, more than enough, and maybe even be the ideal dose for most people. Right, so like on my really intense days, I prioritize my workout. I make sure that I do that early on, like the idea of swallowing the biggest frog first. But on days where I know I'm just going to go for a walk, then, you know, like, great if I still get it done early. But the idea is, like, I'll kind of rotate it around the intensity. Like, all right, I know the workout's going to be a beast today, so I got to get that done first. All right, and then, like, all the work, like Sam said, Parkinson's law will take care of itself. But if I know I'm just doing a brisk walk, like today for an hour, well, you know, I'll do that with my wife before dinner, so then I can, you know, do work a little earlier. But no, exactly what Sam says, you know, it's very easy to put off working out, especially when you have a lot of work to do. And if you aren't already in the habit of working out and don't already have the consistency in your workout plan, you need to flip that, right? You need to make, and what you'll find most likely is that you become way more productive at your work anyways. Right. Just because the workout energized you, and it boosted endorphins and dopamine and many other of those wonderful neurotransmitters, that you actually get more work done even if you had less time to do it, just because you were so much more efficient and productive. So we could actually make the argument that working out is a force multiplier for any other type of productivity for work, right? And I would make that argument.
I would too.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which is, we have an echo chamber, so of course.
Literally,
yeah.
So, you know, over the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about this priority pyramid of exercise, right? Starting out with low intensity exercise, that is your foundation. On top of that, stacking strength training. Yeah. So, you know, this is working against resistance, whether it's, you know, the resistance of gravity and your own body weight, or lifting weights or swinging kettlebells, strength training, and then on top of that, the high intensity metabolic conditioning type of workout. So most of the days, the highest frequency is our low intensity.
Yep.
The next level of frequency is, you know, lower frequency is our strength training, and then the lowest frequency in a given week is our metabolic conditioning, high intensity type training. On top of that, we talked about essentially 3 strategies to get started with fasting, right? That idea of having, and it's not a true fast, but 2 days of the week are a low calorie day, right? Maybe about 1,000 calories depending on the individual. Or doing that once a week, 24-hour fast, right? Which will, you know, in the aggregate be calorie reduction. But then the key is being consistent, right? So it's like, I fasted this week. That in itself is not going to do anything. Yeah. It's over time, fasting once a week, week after week after week, months in, that over time, you know, your total calorie intake should have been reduced. Yeah. Right? Or this daily fast idea where essentially we're just skipping breakfast every day or 5 days a week. Yeah. Right? And then finally, putting those two things together and stacking exercise onto being in a fasted state. And those are, you know, some of our go-to tips. Anything you want to add there?
I think you really nailed it. I think the key is, like, a lot of people might be thinking, like, well, that sounds very simple, and, like, yeah, like, it should be, right? It should exactly. Like, fitness should be very simple, and, like as your shockproof shit detector, the more, like, complicated or, like, intricate, like, a fitness or nutrition plan seems, the more likely it's probably a load of BS, right? So it's not a matter of, like, figuring out what works. We know what works, right? It's a matter of making it practical. Right. So that's why we wanted to come in here and give you a framework that we believe is not only, you know, a great way to make sure you're being both effective and efficient at the same time, but a framework that really can fit just about anybody's lifestyle, and is flexible enough that whether you have 2 hours to go spend at the gym or even 15 minutes just to work out home, like, you can make this framework work. And then same thing nutritionally, like, we gave these, like, we don't want to make it seem like there's only one way to fast or one type of diet to eat. Rather, here's a series of tools. Here's what we found works really well. Go, take some of them, test them out, be consistent. My rule is if you're going to try something, like 2 months. Like,
commit to it.
Give it 2 months before you really make any opinion on it, and then you know, track, log, see your progress, try something else out for another 2 months, and you can go and compare. And it's over time through this discovery process that you will arrive at the ideal nutrition and training plan for you.
So again, thank you guys for joining us, you know, the last 2 weeks. So make sure, if you missed it, catch the replay of last week's episode where we really got into the details of this strategy, this priority pyramid that we're talking about, and how we're, you know, fitting certain tactics into that strategy. Make sure you join us next week. My co-hosts Dave and Alex will be back with us, and we're going to be talking about some of their travels in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, and a couple other places. If you enjoyed what you guys saw today, you thought there was something of value, please, you know, hit that like button and make sure to share it with your friends and family, because I think there's a lot of useful health and fitness and just general wellness tips that we talked about over the last 2 weeks. So, thanks again. Thank you, Pat, for being my guest.
Thank you for having me on
over the last 2 weeks, and we will catch you next week.
Adios.